Well, joining us this week on the Honky Tonk Time Machine on K103, we are absolutely honored and privileged to have the lead singer of Restless Hearts, Larry Stewart, along for the ride. And he's also one of three members of the frontmen of country music. Larry, thanks so much for taking the time and talking with us. This is awesome.
Hey, Glenn, thank you, man. Appreciate your time.
Frontmen of country music coming to the Marion Culture and Civic Center on January 22nd. So you've teamed up with Richie McDonald of Lone Star and Tim Rushlow of Little Texas to form this, I guess you would call it an all-star band or a power band. How would you describe it?
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. We've been doing this on and off for, right at 10 years. We started out going overseas to perform for the men and women in uniform, during our off season, January and February when we weren't with our bands. And, we decided to kind of spread that out a little bit and put a little bit more into it and kind of do some touring together here in the States. And so I don't know what you call us. Call us anything you want. All I know is we're three guys that love to sing together, and we've been lucky enough to have hits on the radio over the years, and we love to go do those songs and bring back memories for the people.
I was born in the 80s, grew up on 90s country, so three of my all-time favorite bands and the front men for each one of them collaborating. I think it's great. You're going to be back in Marion on the 22nd, and somewhat of a homecoming for you. I know you're originally from Paducah, Kentucky, so you'll be back in the Midwest.
Yeah, I've been to Marion many times, and so it's going to be great to come back. I don't know that Restless Heart, if we ever played Marion or not. I'm pretty sure we didn't. We were in the area quite a bit, but so it'll be great to come play the Civic Center.
What was it like coming up in Paducah, Kentucky? That's not too far from here either.
Well, a lot of memories there. I didn't really grow up doing music. I grew up doing sports. I played all three sports, basketball, football, baseball, and really spent a lot of time doing baseball. Played college baseball after that at Paducah Community College for a year or so. Then went on to Belmont University and played there, and that's what got me to music because, in Paducah, it wasn't really cool for a linebacker on the football team at Paducah Tillman to go play gospel piano for his dad on the weekends, So I didn't really tell anybody about that, So I grew up playing, and singing with my father, but that's really about it. I didn't do anything else around Paducah except sports and just hanging around with my buddies.
So when you got to Nashville playing at Belmont, did you just kind of fall in love with the music scene, or was it always in the back of your mind that you might try it if baseball didn't work out?
Well, when I was young, I'd stand with a baseball bat when I was little bitty on my bed thinking that I was singing to tens of thousands of people, So I dreamed about that growing up, but I just didn't have an outlet or know what that meant. I loved sports as much as I loved music. And I was too stupid to know what I was supposed to do with my life when I got older. So the good Lord put me on a baseball team that came to Nashville to play Volunteer State. And we had some friends in the business. My dad loved to sing, and he had some friends. And they called Coach Witten at Belmont. Mm-hmm. And this was like after my father died, and so his friends were trying to take care of me a little bit. So they called him and said, "Hey, we got this guy. We've seen him play. He's really good. Would you go up and watch him play?" Well, lo and behold, he did. I guess, again, it was kind of a God thing, I think. And he and his assistant coach came and watched me, and I hit 2 home runs in the game, and they offered me a scholarship. That's how I got to Belmont to meet musicians and songwriters and singers. And for the first time in my life, I was like, wow, so I guess it's cool to be a musician. And it was like a bird let out of a cage. And the next thing I knew, I met Dave Ennis, the keyboard player for Restless Heart, and met some guys and some songwriters around town. And Tim Dubois and Scott Hendricks are putting a band together, a bunch of Okies. They needed a lead singer, so they came after me. And Tim asked me if I wanted to be the lead singer of the band, and I said, "No, sir." I don't.
You told him no, huh?
I told him no. I was working at the Country Music Hall of Fame, And he said it was Thanksgiving of, should I say the year? I mean, come on.
I'm
1983.
83. Okay, I was going to guess 84, so I was off.
And so he said, well, go to Thanksgiving, think about it, talk to your family about it. And so I came back on a Tuesday. He said he'd call me at noon on a Tuesday and, see where I was. So the phone rang at noon on Tuesday. So we talked a minute about what we ate and what we did for Thanksgiving. So he said, well, Larry, you going to do this thing? You going to do this band with us? And my head shook no, and my mouth went yes, and I started sweating. I was like, oh, no, what have I done with my life? And that was the beginning of Restless Heart.
So to think it was almost not to be, and I think I'd heard that he had Verlin Thompson in mind as the lead singer, and then it was one of the other band members that suggested you. Is that right?
No, Verlin, they cut some tracks, some really cool music, and his wife at the time said, no, you're not going to be in a band.
Oh, really?
So so that's why they came from me, because they needed a lead singer. They'd already cut tracks on some songs, and we're kind of going to go for it. And Verlin's wife decided she didn't want him to do that, so he kind of went away, walked away from the band, and they came after me.
Well, you talk about Tim Dubois, just a huge name in the music business, by the way, from right here in Missouri, opposite side of the state. But not only did he discover Restless Heart, he'd go on to discover Alan Jackson, Brooks and Dunn, Pam Tillis, Brad Paisley, Diamond Rio, and a few others. And he also wrote a lot of Restless Heart's early work. And because you guys were kind of a demo band at that time, I don't think he had Restless Heart in mind to eventually record these songs, but that's just kind of how it worked out.
Well, Tim wrote a bunch of songs that he pitched to Alabama, and they passed on them. So, like Heartbreak Kid and Let the Heartache Ride, and those first singles that were released to you guys at radio, because Let the Heartache Ride went to 20, I think, and then Heartbreak Kid went to 10, and I Want Everyone Who Hears This Song to Cry was released, and because all of those were rejections of Alabama, so we cut them, and that was the beginning of the Restless Heart's radio career.
I meant to ask you how the name Restless Heart was born. Do you remember how or who came up with it? Because I think it's a great name. I
do. Well, listen, we went through all the showcases, negotiated with all the, with 2 or 3 labels. We ended up signing with Joe Galante over at RCA, and we had no name for the band. I mean, we were just getting started. And by the way, a lot of those guys are from Oklahoma, so they kind of knew each other and started playing together and all that stuff. And Tim wrote some hits and got some money, and so they put a band together. But Galante says, you know what, we have a single we're going to release in January. It'd be nice to put a name of the band on the record. So we kind of got in. We had family trying to come up with names, and we're sitting in rooms and, trying to find, we'd all come up with 10 names. They were horrible, too, some really bad names. But Greg Jennings, our guitar player, said, well, there's a song that we recorded called Restless Heart. That's kind of cool. And we all just looked at each other, and it kind of just hit us all so positively. And so we called the label and said, well, the name of the band is Restless Heart. They said, great, we're going to put it on the single. We're sending it out this week. And so we had to come up with a name. Then we released some singles, and we still hadn't gone out on the road yet. And so finally, the very first show we did, the very first show we ever played in front of a paying audience in an arena, was opening for Alabama in Murphy Center in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I was scared to death.
Wow. Nothing like waiting to the last minute to come up with the name, but I would imagine in those early days especially, you were getting compared to them quite a bit, to Alabama, I mean, and that's not an easy band to be compared to, but I think you held up pretty well.
Well, check this out. So, I don't think Randy Orland was real happy about Galante signing another band. I mean, because they were just getting going. They were the hottest thing in country music. And so their label signs another band, right on the heels. So Galante, asked, he drove to Fort Payne Alabama, and had a meeting with Randy and said, "Hey, Randy, would you let this band open for and see what y'all think?" So we opened for them in Murfreesboro, and the next thing we knew, we were on tour with them, opening for them for the next year and a half. So that was the beginning of of spreading the Restless Heart music around. I mean, what better way than to do arenas in front of 10, 15,000 people for the next year? So that's pretty cool.
I miss the days, Larry, of the great country band. There's a few left. There's a few that are kind of out there doing their thing, but it seemed like back in those days, you were getting a lot of them. 80s and 90s, there were so many good country bands, and I miss it.
Well, we talk about that a lot, and we don't know what happened. We don't know why the industry or where, all of a sudden the bands went away and the bands weren't being played on radio, because, I grew up listening to all kinds of bands, from rock to pop to country to bluegrass. I mean, I was just a band and a harmony kind of guy, and so it was funny that that's the path that my profession, chose, to be in a band with harmonies. But now you just don't really hear that anymore, and I miss it too. I agree with you.
Yeah, I definitely miss those harmonies. So your first album came out in 1985, self-titled. 4 pretty big hits off that album. You mentioned a few of them already. What do you remember about that time when with albums out, you're getting hits on radio, and things are going well?
Well, I remember we were still doing some recording when we released Let the Heartache Ride, which was our first single. And I remember, we've been in and out. You stay at the studio late, go home, get some sleep, get back in the car and go back to town to finish things up. And I was on I-40 coming in from the west side of Nashville. And the a cappella intro of Let the Heartache Ride Tonight came on. And I just figured it was in my cassette player. I was listening to some, to our music, driving in. I just still hadn't had enough coffee, and I realized it was coming through the radio on the Big 98. Jerry House was playing, and I pulled over the side of the road on the interstate with rush hour traffic flying by me. My car shaking back and forth, just because I had to listen for the first time to hear my voice come across the radio. And it was the coolest moment. It almost seems like it was just a couple of years ago. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing how many people have told me that same exact experience. They hear their song for the first time on the radio, and they have to pull the car over. I guess something just comes over you. You can't drive and listen at the same time.
Why can't you drive and listen? Why do you have to pull over? I don't know. I just did.
Back to the Heartbreak Kid, probably the biggest hit off of that first album, wouldn't you say?
I would say one of my top 3 favorite Restless Heart songs of all time.
Really? Yeah.
Just the whole guitar riff and the harmonies, and it's just one of my favorites. So that one, kind of got us going. Greg Jennings did that slide kind of solo, and they made us go in and redo it because it was too rock. So he did this more cleaner slide solo, and, radio played it. And it was so cool. I mean, we kind of realized then that we needed to go back in the studio immediately. Back then, if you remember, singles only lasted like 7 or 8 weeks or something.
Right,
It was like boom, boom, boom. So we went in immediately and started recording the Wheels album. And so we were off and running.
I want to get your thoughts on that, because now singles are lasting, some of them, over a year. I mean, it's crazy how long songs last on the radio. And I suppose that's good for the artist, but I don't know if it's necessarily good for the listener. What are your thoughts on that? And do you wish it would kind of go back to the way it was?
Well, that's a good question. I'm sure the songwriters like it now,
yeah.
If they have a number 1 hit, obviously. But I don't know. Back then, the business was so much fun, and you made friends with DJs and music directors and program directors, and you'd go out and visit them, and they'd come to the shows and hang out, and call them on the radio, call them on the phone, and it just seemed like it was more people friendly back then. I don't want anybody to wrong, because there's a bunch of great folks in the business now too, young artists. I really love them. It's so corporate now. back then it was just we were rocking and rolling and having fun and you know, having top 10 singles, and all of a sudden, I guess it's easy for me to say it would be fun because we started having number one songs and we had like 7 in a row. So that was fun. So I don't know. I'm loyal to the times. I really liked the 80s and 90s.
Lead singer of Restless Heart, Larry Stewart, is with us. He's also one of the 3 front men of country music, coming to Marion on January the 22nd. Larry, I want to talk a little bit more about some of the singles because we're going to mix them in throughout the course of our 2-hour show. You mentioned the Wheels album. If the Restless Heart album kind of introduced you to everybody, the Wheels album really kind of put you in your place kind of on top. What was it, like 4 number ones off of that second album? That was a huge follow-up for you.
Boy, wasn't it? It really was. It was kind of amazing because I think there was, it didn't break a record or do anything, but there's not very many bands who had, 4 number one singles off one album. And we pulled that off. So, I'll Still Be Loving You was nominated for a Grammy, and we went up to Radio City Music Hall, and we got to perform it on the Grammys with Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson sitting about 12 feet from me. I was nervous as I could be. And, that album really put us on the map, and in a lot of ways. I mean, we crossed over and started getting adult contemporary airplay, and pop stations played. I think I'll Still Be Loving You went top 40. So anyway, it was just kind of a time in our career that you guys at radio were playing the fire out of us, and the people on Music Row didn't like us. They, because country music was very traditional at that time. We got started with Randy Travis, and his bread truck. We were going, the Judds and all just very more earthy, countryer sounds. And then here come these 5 guys with mullets doing 5-part harmony, and they didn't like it. They really didn't. I mean, the award shows didn't particularly like. I mean, we finally won the Academy of Country Music vocal group of the year. But anyway, thank God for you guys at radio. The support was there, and it continued, and for a good 9-10 years. So that was a good time.
It's funny because the 80s was a very interesting time in country music because you did have that prevailing pop sound that was starting to take over. Urban Cowboy, Kenny Rogers, yourselves. But as you mentioned, there was still strong support for traditional country. And you guys were kind of polarizing audiences. They either loved you or they hated you. So what's going through your mind when you're seeing that split in the country audience?
We're stuck in the middle of a storm. We didn't know what to think. We were just kind of riding it out, doing what we needed to do and doing what we were told and going where they wanted us to go and just kind of doing our thing. We had no idea what we were doing. We didn't try to do anything other than what the 5 guys going in the studio and taking these songs that we'd written or we'd found and making them us. We didn't say, well, that's not going on in radio right now. We need to do something, different. No, we just did what we did, and we got lucky and landed on something. And again, you guys played us, so we didn't really, we got our feelings hurt a little bit. We had people saying some mean things, but that's okay. Now, they say, now that's real country music. Right. when they hear the Blues Eyes in Texas. Now it's real country music. Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, that's what I kind of laugh about too, is because all this stuff that they called pop country back in the 80s is it really is being considered traditional country music. I think it just depends on when you were born, right, or what you like.
Yeah, it does. I don't think there's ever been an era where everybody liked the music that was happening. I mean, we all complain about the music no matter what age we are, and then as time goes on, they go, now that's real country music. It's just so funny. But
Well, and it probably didn't help with your detractors when some of your songs actually started crossing over onto the pop charts, like I'll Still Be Loving You.
Well, no, I'll Still Be Loving You. See, that one really got us in trouble. That was really anti-Music Row. And, but man, that song, gosh, it's just been such a blessing to us, and you wouldn't believe the back then the letters and the stories, and still to this day, I mean, our military men and women, when we get to play for them and they share a story, and that song's just been a pretty powerful song just across the board. So that one's blessed a lot of us.
You get to the third album, Big Dreams in a Small Town, 4 more huge hits off of it. 2 of them went to number 1. Bluest Eyes in Texas. I want to get your thoughts on that song because I really want to feature it. It is my favorite Restless Heart song, and I know it was actually written by a couple of Black Hawk guys, or they went on to join the band Black Hawk, and Van Stevenson and Dave Robbins, right?
That's right. That's right. We were getting ready to record that album you just mentioned, and we had a hard time playing Texas. Just our sound just didn't tickle the ear of the state of Texas yet, and they brought us that song, and it was like God delivered us this something. I mean, it was just amazing, and the demo was amazing, and it was every element of the Bluest Eyes in Texas is so now what does Restless Heart sound like? Well, you would play them the Bluest Eyes in Texas.
Yeah.
That's everything we are vocally, cool vocal arrangement. That's the guitar work, it's the perfect Restless Heart sound. And, so yeah, we hear that a lot. Bluest Eyes in Texas is a lot of people's favorite Restless Heart song.
I was talking to Henry Paul from Black Hawk last year, who had a lot of really good things to say about you guys, and he was kind of telling me the story behind Van and Dave writing that song. At that time, I don't know if you knew those guys or interacted with those guys, but if you did, could you see that coming, that they would go on and have their own success together?
I met Henry later because he, came to town, but Van and Dave, we all go way back before we even had a name for Restless Heart. So those guys are just great songwriters, and they, Van wrote Big Dreams in a Small Town. Let's see, there's some other stuff that Van wrote for us, and then Dave wrote, Bluest Eyes in Texas, and so anyway, I didn't really know Henry, but then when they started putting those records on the radio, that's when I knew what Black Hawk was, because I knew Dave and Van were, starting a band, but it wasn't until I heard them on the radio. That's the first time I heard them was on the radio. Boy, they had a string of hits too. Yeah,
I feel like they're one of the more underrated bands of the 90s. I've always enjoyed them. So moving on to like some of the Restless Heart stuff in the early 90s. Now, you had left the band in 91, 92. They kept making some really good music while you were gone. Now that you're back with Restless Heart, do you guys still play all that stuff that they did while you weren't with them?
Well, some of it. Tell you a funny story. When She Cries, I found it.
Oh, really?
And gave it. Yeah. Am I stupid or what?
Well, I guess you can't have them all.
Well, again, that was just a meant-to-be thing. I was recording my album with All Right Already, and I had that song. And so I actually saved it at the RCA meeting. I saved it last, and something happened in that meeting that just didn't click. And maybe they thought it was a little too slick for what we were doing, on the album up to then, but we couldn't get everybody in the room to sign off on it. And at that time, I was still listening to people around me, hey, well, I don't know. Okay, whatever y'all think. I didn't have a really strong personality coming. No way, man, I'm cutting that thing. I don't care what you think. It's what I should have done probably. But no, it was a meant-to-be thing. I got home back then. Remember our Codaphones? You walk through your door and go push the button and listen to your messages.
Uh-huh.
But Josh Leo, the producer, that's going to go in and cut Restless Heart, called and said, "Hey, Larry, that When She Cries song, if you're not going to cut it, I would love to cut it on Restless Heart." And I called him and said, "Man, well, I love that song. It's like my favorite song that we're cutting. But, if I'm not going to do it, I'd love for the guys to do it." So, again, what a great record they made out of that. And Greg Jennings, his guitar work on that was, something special. But I love the words to that song. I mean, I've lived that song. We've lived that song as artists, being gone for, 6-7 weeks at a time, doing radio tours and touring and doing shows and going out west and being gone forever and leaving our wives and our infant babies at home. How we survive that, we don't ever know. But that's what, when she cries, just has that lyric that just, it's almost, we lived it.
During that time, you had started your solo career and done some really good things as a solo artist. Did you just miss being with the band? What was that time like away from the band that ultimately then led you to, join back up?
Well, when I left, actually, Greg Jennings, the guitar player, and I were going to lead together because just people weren't getting along at all in this band. I mean, it was getting bad, and people were kind of falling off the edge of the earth. You know how musicians can be, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. So Greg decided not to. He wasn't comfortable, and I said, "I got to. I can't stay around this any longer." So that's why we kind of, I walked away. And then a few years later, 4 of the 5 of us got back together. Dave Ennis, the keyboard player, did not. He was living somewhere else. And we got together. We did a greatest hits package and went out and, toured with Vince Gill for a year. And then we did some more shows, and then we shut it down again. And then 2001, Dave came back to Nashville and got in touch with a few of the guys. And so we all said, "Hey, let's meet over Greg's studio and say hey." So we went over there and talked, and we got together and sang for a young lady who was diagnosed with cancer, and it was really kind of a moment for us. And we called our booking agent from back then. So he had to get in the car and come over and really see if the 5 of us were in a room together. And so we agreed to say, "Hey, let's go do some shows together." Everybody kind of grown up a little. We did a little group hug and decided to get back together. And those few shows turned into 18 years of touring together. 18 more years, 19. So.
Yeah, going on 20 years back together now, and
yep.
You guys still tour, don't you? I mean, I know you're with the frontmen right now, but you probably looking forward to doing some more shows with Restless Heart.
Well, John, our drummer, has retired, so he won't be coming back. The voice of When She Cries, by the way.
Okay.
And I've decided I'm going to do a few of these, and I'm sure we'll do something. We'll see what 2022 has in store, 2023. But, right now I'm doing the front men thing, and we just might do something a little later. We'll see.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the front men. Again, Marion Culture and Civic Center, January 22nd. This is going to be a fun show. Richie McDonald from Lone Star is another one of the front men, as is Tim Rushlow from Little Texas. I think you briefly mentioned how the idea formed to get the 3 of you together. Can you touch on that again, on when you guys actually decided, hey, let's form this trio? Yeah,
well, 11 years ago, Richie and I were down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, doing a fundraiser. And so we're at this Marriott getting ready to go into the big room and do our thing. But we were sitting at the lobby bar drinking coffee, waiting for our turn. And so Richie said, "Hey, man, I've had this idea that I've been wanting to talk to you about. Songwriters are doing these songwriter in the rounds, and then some of these solo artists are getting together and, acoustically and going and doing some shows. So I've just been thinking, what if we found 3 front men, lead singers of bands to go kind of do the same thing just for, fun here and there." And I said, "Man, I love that idea." So, long story short, we thought we'd go for the big gun. I mean, we just said, well, who's another lead singer? Randy Owens. So we got in touch with Randy and his agent, and Randy said, yeah, I'd love to. So the very first frontman show we ever did was me and Richie and Randy. And, I have the poster on my wall.
Wow.
So we did some shows, not many, mostly private, so he then decided he, didn't want to do it for that kind of money, and he decided that he wanted to put Alabama back together. And we certainly understood that. So we just one day, was talking. Richie ran into Tim at a mall and told him, hey, we're doing this thing, called Frontman. Randy's not doing it anymore. But would you be interested? So long story short, again, we met and talked about it. And he said, man, I got this idea. Man, I've been doing this thing for Navy Entertainment, going overseas and performing the troops. Man, the three of us could go over there and they would eat it up. Well, lo and behold, they did. And we did, 5 or 6 tours over a 7 or 8 year period. And I mean, we landed on the USS Bush and the USS Truman out in the, in the Persian Gulf, and landed in the middle of Afghanistan, went downrange. I mean, we did some really crazy stuff. Wow. And I've gotten too old to do that crazy stuff anymore, but it was an experience I'll never forget. And to really understand what, these kids do and the sacrifices that they make is frankly moving. And great experiences for us right there.
What's the dynamic of a show like with 3 lead singers? I guess you probably take turns doing each other's songs, and while, like, if you're doing a Restless Heart song, you'll take the lead and the other 2 will back you up, or, take me through how that works.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did, and Richie plays piano, and me and Tim have acoustic guitar, and then I'll go over and play piano on a couple songs. Richie will go to the center, but it's hit after hit after hit after hit. Number one hit after number one hit after number one hit. It's pretty cool. And I get to sing harmony on those big old, I'm Already There, or Amazed, God Bless Texas, and What Might Have Been. I mean, it just goes on and on. So we have a great time singing on each other's songs.
Harmony for days, I bet.
Yeah. Yep. Sure is.
So I got to ask you then, what's your favorite? We'll start with Lone Star. What's your favorite Lone Star song?
I mean, Richie's written so many stinking hits, and we love to sing them all. I mean, come on. But, I mean, you can't argue with Amazed. But I think really my favorite one, because I know the story behind it, and he tells the story during the show of how he wrote it. He was out west on one of those when she cries moments, when he's gone for weeks and weeks, and Richie talked to his little, 3-year-old, or however old Rhett was, very young. Said, Daddy, when you coming home? And Richie said, I'm already there. Didn't know what to say to that. And he hung up, and the songwriter light went on. He wrote that song, I think with another writer. And I think that song got him to being my songwriter of the year back in. I mean, it's just I love singing that one.
Boy, they sure blew up after Amazed came out. And they'd been doing some good stuff before, those songs, but man, they sure blew up after that.
Front Porch Looking In, that's one of my favorite. I love that song. We love singing that song together too.
How about Little Texas? I've actually had members of Little Texas on this show before, so I'd be interested to know what your favorite Little Texas song is too.
Maybe What Might Have Been. That's a really great ballad. But the fun factor on Little Texas stuff, like You Gotta Kick a Little and God Bless Texas, there's a lot of fun songs that can get the crowd rocking and rolling. So a lot of great Little Texas songs. Amy's Back in Austin, because that's kind of got that, Eaglesy, Restless Heart kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And the harmonies on that are really cool. So, yeah, between the three of us, we've got plenty of songs that we enjoy singing together, I can tell you that.
Yeah, plenty of number one hits and a ton of top 40 hits between those three bands. And you get to hear most of, if not all of them, when you go see the frontmen of country music at the Marion Culture and Civic Center on January the 22nd. Larry Stewart is the lead singer of Restless Heart. He's one of the three frontmen of country music. And Larry, I've had a blast talking to you. Anything else about the show? Anything else newsworthy about Restless Heart before we let you go?
Well, Glenn, not really. You know, hey, just come out and you want to, you know, bring back some memories and relive some 90s songs and moments. It's really a lot of fun. It's really intimate and stories behind the songs, and we have a great time together. So come on out and enjoy some music.
Easiest way to get tickets, just get to K103FM.com. We've got the link set up for you there, or you can also go to the Marion Culture and Civic Center website. That's MarionCCC.com. Either way, that'll get the job done as far as getting your Frontmen of Country tickets for January 22nd. Larry, you've been great. After hearing your voice on the radio for over 40 years, to finally be able to get to talk to you, it's been awesome.
Well, thank you for the time. I enjoyed it. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It's been a real pleasure. I grew up on your music. I don't mean to make you feel old when I say that, but
oh, sure. There you go. That's what Richie says on. Richie says that on stage. He says, "Yeah, I grew up on y'all's music." I said, "Oh, shut up."
Now, if Richie says it, that must make you feel old.
No, isn't that the truth?
Thanks again, Larry.
Okay, Glenn. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.